Hi everybody, I'm JT and welcome to another video from me here at Campervan Journey. So thanks for joining me here on my driveway in my California studio for today's vlog. So today's vlog is a vlog all about the elephant in the room, which may be nagging some of us a little bit about the rumoured abolition of petrol and diesel engines in 2030 here in the UK and potentially sooner in other parts of the world. So I just wanted to sit down and give you my thoughts on what that means for us as campervan owners. Just talk about a few of the things that I think may or may not happen. So thanks very much indeed for joining me today, and remember, if you're enjoying the content that I'm putting together, just click the button to subscribe, and let's get into it. So approximately 15 years ago here in the UK, there was a massive drive from the government to get everybody to switch to a diesel engine vehicle. Now, the reason for that was to do with carbon dioxide emissions. It was very clear that diesel engines and their combustion process emitted far less CO2, carbon dioxide, and therefore they were better for the environment. Reduced CO2 was a good thing for the planet, so much so that global targets were set for manufacturers to reduce their average carbon dioxide levels significantly, and there were financial penalties if they weren't able to get below a certain level in a certain time frame. Petrol engines in commercial vehicles has never really been a big theme because they're nowhere near as efficient. In recent history, obviously there's been more concern around not just the CO2 element but also the particulates that diesel engines emit, and especially in urban areas how this significantly affects air quality, both through pollution and smog, but also from the health of people who live in urban environments in more congested traffic areas. And various studies that have been in the press and medical journals about how the particulates do significantly affect health, obviously through asthma, especially with younger children, anybody with other respiratory problems. And there's been a move to try and ban combustion engines as being a main cause of this. Now, the argument for whether they are the sole cause or whether there are other aspects that influence this is probably for another time, but in an urban environment there are many other things that contribute to pollution, but there are two different really strong sides to this, the impacts that these engines have. But ultimately, if there can be a solution to try and improve them, I think we should embrace that, play our part if you like, but I don't think it's naturally something we should be concerned about either, that these vehicles are going to be outlawed and banned as existing vehicles. It's the sale of new ones going forward. So I just wanted to cover off a few different thoughts of mine about this in this vlog, and if you'd like to comment below and let me know what your thoughts are, or if you've had any experience of changing fuel type, again, just let me know. Be good to hear from you. As of 2030 in the UK, diesel engines are going to be outlawed along with petrol and what's described as ICE or internal combustion engines. Now, I imagine there's been a lot of nervous reaction to this news, but I just wanted to do a bit of a vlog about it because I think there's a few things that we need to understand, that I don't believe it's something that is necessary that we absolutely panic about, and I certainly don't think that it's going to be the end of the campervan as we know it. Now, recent times there's been an awful lot of pressure, quite rightly, to try and clean up the efficiency and economy and emissions that all vehicles generate. And vans based on sort of older technology and normally running with diesel engines have traditionally been one of the most polluting types of vehicles that you can buy. There's been a lot of measures in recent times to try and combat that, and we've seen sort of the downsizing in engine technologies, so moving from 2.5, 3 litre diesel engines to smaller engines in conjunction with turbocharging. This increases their efficiency, also reduces the emissions that they emit, and clearly also a smaller engine is generally going to use less fuel as well. Another significant change that was introduced several years back now is something called Adblue. And Adblue is an additive that is injected into the exhaust process that helps to neutralise some of the emissions that come out of the exhaust system as well. And we're seeing that more and more on passenger vehicles, and in order to achieve the latest Euro 6 environmental measures, having an Adblue tank and what's called selective catalytic reduction, and using the Adblue liquid to try and neutralise these emissions, is the only way that you can bring down the emission levels of particularly the noxious gases that the exhaust systems emit. So that's something that's become more and more commonplace, and lots of us will be used to topping up this Adblue liquid in a very similar way that we would top up screen wash on our cars. But there's been an awful lot of news, especially in the UK, and I'm sure across the rest of Europe, about the banning of diesel engines, and especially in an effort to try and combat a emissions problem. Now, I think there's two sides to the argument that's trying to be combated, and they're both very slightly different things. So in the UK there's a big concern about urban pollution, especially particulates. Now, diesel engines emit particulates. That's part of the combustion process, and the exhaust catalytic converters are all designed to capture those particulates. But what diesel is very, very good at is running at a level which generates less carbon dioxide as well. So there's two really arguments that have been trying to be tackled by the processes by banning combustion engines. So one is to deal with the particulates that end up in the atmosphere, which big concern about breathing and health, especially if you live in an urban environment. But then from an environmental point of view and a global warming point of view, carbon dioxide levels, and again, are an aspect which people want to try and reduce, again quite rightly. But diesel engines have always had a lower carbon output than certainly petrol engines of similar size and performance as well. So wiping out and trying to cancel all of these in one foul swoop might seem to be a good strong political argument, but I think it's flawed in many respects, in that 50% of the vehicles on UK roads currently run on diesel, and just to completely abolish them in one foul sweep is, whilst it might achieve a short-term goal, the knock-on impacts of that I think are there's several that you would want to consider as well. So what happens with all of these older vehicles? Where does the scrap go? Do they be able to recycle them? Where does the engine components go? Can all of the older vehicles that are around on the roads at the moment, there's a natural process for trying to replace these, and having everything gone by 2030 is not a realistic objective, and that seems to be the thing that the press have latched onto. But the rules and regulations that the government in the UK are trying to aim towards are actually based on new vehicles. So first of all, it will be the abolishment of new vehicle sales, not any existing vehicles that will be on the road. Now, one would assume that there'll be a natural timescale for the defleeting of these cars as they reach their end of life. Now, most vehicles of this type are designed to last a long time and do a high mileage, so it's natural to assume that you might have a 20 to 30 year after 2030 where these vehicles are still going to be on the road. And there needs to be other systems and processes to try and manage the efficiency of these vehicles and make sure that they achieve higher efficiency over time. Companies have cropped up in recent times looking at conversions, so either electric conversions or gas conversions, both of which are quite costly exercises, but it may be cheaper with newer technology in 10 years time to actually convert an existing van such as this one by installing a battery pack and then motors, and that may well be a good opportunity, a good business idea. In fact, there's many people already trying to do it with converting classic cars. In fact, there is I've seen some classic Volkswagen Campervans converted to run on electric batteries and range as well. And of course, Volkswagen have their new ID Buzz coming through as an electric concept camper too. Problem with the electric conversions is they're very expensive, and then the elephant in the room with all of them is the range. If you've got an electric vehicle that has a range of 200 to 250 miles versus a diesel engined van that will give you a range of getting on for double that, then the versatility is, especially for a vehicle that's designed to do long journeys and longer touring journeys, it doesn't quite stack up. So there must be other alternatives that we as owners can look forward to, and the motor industry, the van industry can engage with to try and have a more practical solutions, rather than just people being worried that these vehicles are certainly going to just disappear and they're going to have to invest thousands and thousands of pounds in replacing what is, aside from the drivetrain, a perfectly good functioning vehicle. So in my head, I think that probably the long-term solution is synthetic fuels for vehicles like this. A number of the large fuel companies are working on new fuel technology which will either fully synthetic or biofuels, which engines can be modified to run on, which produce a far lesser environmental impact, both in carbon dioxide emissions and the particulate emissions that you get as a result of the combustion process. What I think is required is very much a change in tact from governments in terms of their revenue gathering to encourage the adoption of these new technologies, and an appreciation that electric, which seems to be the pure drive for lots of governments at the moment, electric is not the ideal answer for all users. Electric vehicles are a great solution for shorter journeys, certainly, but there are many compromises, and it's about finding the right balance for each individual user. So electric cars, and I'm a big advocate of electric car technology, but you have to also appreciate there is a negative impact with those, in much the same way as there is with a diesel engine one. It's just the negative impacts are different. So where the metals and elements that are required from the batteries are obtained from, there's very limited resources of those, and some of the mining that is undertaken to capture these is done in very poor countries, and the conditions that people are working under to extract these minerals it can be questionable at times. But the resource for these minerals to run these batteries is limited, in just the same way that oil is limited. It's just the same way that other resources for normal combustion engine vehicles are limited. So having an alternative solution, to coin a phrase, not putting all of our eggs in one basket, is I think a very important thing to do. So I don't think that we should be worried the legislation is geared towards new vehicle sales, that there'll be an immediate cut-off and shut down of availability for diesel fuel. That's just not going to happen. There's too much at stake and too many vehicles that run on diesel and require diesel. A change of tack about the appropriate vehicle for an appropriate use certainly could change, and maybe incentives and technologies that will enable people to adapt their current fuel and how they run their vehicle will become more prevalent. So it wasn't too long ago when it was fairly commonplace for people to consider adapting a petrol engine car to run on LPG, liquid petroleum gas. It's a cleaner fuel, cheaper fuel, but the take up was very, very low because the infrastructure for LPG supply wasn't great. Now, whether we'll see something similar along the lines of modifying diesel engines to run on synthetic fuel or biofuel will happen. No doubt there'll be some changes required to the engine management systems to allow for the engines to cope with a different grade of fuel. But I certainly don't believe that the campervan as we know it is going to succumb to a change in the market and availability of new diesel engines. Clearly, going out to buy a brand new vehicle will change. We're already seeing van manufacturers starting to offer both hybrid and electric derivatives of their vans. Hybrid is great as a concept, but equally there are compromises with that. With a hybrid vehicle, you are carrying around, if you run on battery power, the efficiency is very low because you're carrying around the weight of your engine drivetrain, and by having a smaller battery and a smaller motor, your range is going to be very limited, normally sort of 20 to 30 miles on a hybrid vehicle, which very much excited to look forward to the Volkswagen ID concept as a pure electric camper van, and there's some amazing images of this, and certainly their new ID3 and their ID4 passenger cars that are coming on stream later this year, and looking at other sister brands within the range, Audi and their e-tron and Porsche and their Taycan. The technology that's available within the Volkswagen Group for pure electric vehicles is amazing. However, range is still not anywhere near as good as a diesel engine would provide, and the charging infrastructure is still nowhere near where it needs to be for most people to consider the car as an electric vehicle as a real alternative solution in a bigger, heavier vehicle such as a van. With a smaller electric vehicle and you've got a range of circa 300 miles, then the technology is getting there. But in a larger vehicle that doesn't have the efficiency, doesn't have the range, because it weighs so much more, then I think electric technology has still got a way to go. And then the other aspect to it is cost. The Volkswagen ID campervan is probably going to cost starting from £60,000 to £70,000, which would be the starting price of the California range at the moment. And then as soon as you start to build up your specification, it could turn out to be a very, very expensive vehicle. So whilst the technology is exciting, the retro styling looks amazing, again, it may be out of reach for many people when it comes on stream in what I believe is 2 to 3 years' time. So where does that leave us in the short term? I think ultimately there's nothing to panic about. I think the campervan as we know it still has many, many years of great service left to offer, and just understand that there's no such a bad story. A negative story is great for selling newspapers. So for every negative, diesel engines are going, petrol engines are going, they're going very, very quickly, there's positives that we can take out of this as well. So replacing all of these vehicles with new vehicles and then having to scrap other vehicles is not the answer. Longer life service, being more efficient in getting a greater term of service, so getting a vehicle like this to do 20 years service, 30 years service, is a very green solution, because you're really maximising the efficiency out of that lifespan. So I'd be really, really interested to hear your thoughts about where you think this whole thing with diesels might go and how it affects us as camper van owners and people who like to take these vans and travel long distances. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but I just thought it was something that was worth addressing. So thank you for joining me here in my Volkswagen California studio, and thank you very much indeed for watching. And remember, if you enjoy the videos that I'm putting together here on Campervan Journey, please remember to click the button to like and subscribe, and there'll be much more content from me here very soon. Thanks for watching.